We have Saturday night hoops, not just in the NBA, but the Final Four as well. So a busy night of basketball for all of us, as much as we can handle on this Saturday night. Welcome to the PHLY Sixers Pregame Show presented by Bet365. Download the Bet365 app. Use code PHLY365 when you sign up. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. And as we were prepping, we had college basketball, some Phillies baseball as they're trying to get another win over the Dodgers, and we had the other television running, waiting for the Sixers game to come on tonight. This is just a busy night overall, Rich, and should be an interesting one, a fun one, if you will, even if we know the Sixers are most likely going to lose, but a fun one with the college basketball, which we'll get into a little bit later.
Yeah, good night to have multiple screens. Everybody knows what the big matchup is tonight that we're going to be talking about.
Yes.
Cooper Flagg against Houston's defense. How do he and Khan handle that ball pressure that those Houston Cougars put on teams?
Exactly. Yeah, yep. So we're hanging out with you here tonight, talk a little Sixers, of course. Talk about the Final Four a little bit later. Give you our Bet365 picks, courtesy of Bet365, obviously. And much, much more. Tank Watch, as well as we have Tank Prospect Watch in the post-game show, and we have Tank Watch in the pregame and post-game, just to let you know what we all are paying attention to for tonight's matchups overall. But, Rich, these young 76ers are winding down now with 5 games. This has been their team for quite a few weeks now, with the starters out, all of them, including Kelly Oubre, finally being shut down at some point. While nothing official, he's been shut down for quite a while for Kelly Oubre as the lone remaining starter left out there to hold it down for the starting 5. And since he went down, it's been the young 76ers just doing their job. And I know we highlight each one that has a good game or something we're looking forward to from that particular player that on any given night, or something that happened in the post game that we need to discuss, or them in general. But as we look at this now with 5 games remaining, and we see Minnesota opposite them tonight, and look, we'll talk about them playing spoiler potentially over the next 5 and even tonight. But for the most part, man, it's just about evaluation of what these players are, who these players might be. Another 10-day contract for Marcus Bagley, who we've seen some decent, some little things here and there. He doesn't get enough run for us to really evaluate him, but just some stuff that he does. Bringing in Colin, what's his last name?
Castleton,
yes. Bringing in Colin Castleton to get a look at him. Seeing O'Shea Brissett as a veteran player. The same with Chuma Okeke, who signed with
the Cavs the other day. I caught that one. That was a scrap heap signing that I did. I did catch
you
on.
Did see that
Good
one.
For
so the young Sixers, we won't talk much about them when this is over with, because we will focus on the offseason and seeing where they go from here, how to correct and construct this roster, look at the head coach, look at the front office, what they need to do going further. But many of these young players that we're talking about right now, we won't. We'll be talking about Jared McCain, certainly, Quentin Grimes, young veteran player, Adem Bona, Justin Edwards. We'll talk about them. But what have you kind of taken away from what the young Sixers have done, how they have composed themselves since this has been their team for the better part of 2.5 weeks?
I feel like they're playing hard, right? I feel like they're giving pretty good effort every night. Again, the defense is not very good, in part because they're overmatched. 2, I don't really think the defensive scheme works. They kind of just go all out for steals and give up threes, but they play hard. I will say, though, when you look at this starting lineup, man, 4 of these players could be a part of the rotation next year. And the one guy who is not in the starting lineup is actually okay, Jared Butler, too. That he's the one guy I am not including, but we'll see what happens with Quentin Grimes in free agency, but obviously you want to bring him back, and if he's a part of the team next year, he's going to be in the rotation. Yabu, yeah, we'll see, right? Mm-hmm. We'll see what his market looks like. We'll see what the Sixers can give him, and what other teams can try to give him also to get him away from Philadelphia, but would be somebody in the rotation. Mm-hmm. And then we've had the 2 young guys in Justin Edwards and Adem Bona, who have I think they've been their best players over the last 10 games, right? It was Edwards for a while there. Maybe 10 games is too much, like 8 or so games. Edwards for the first 4, and then Bona these last few games has been their clear bright spot. So as much as we won't talk about a lot of these players, it's more the bench guys, I would say. Whereas when you look in the starting lineup, no, these guys are not winning a lot of games. They're really not winning any games right now.
Good.
But good, well said. But they all could be a part of a rotation next season when the team is actually trying to win games again.
Yep.
I think so.
Yep, absolutely, man. So of the guys that sticking with the four that you just talked about, because I do want to ask you about the guys that maybe you would look at for a summer league thing, a two-way contract down the line, training camp invite, whatever it might be. But of these four, just consistently, I agree with you that it's good to see Bona do what he did, getting the career high 28 the other night, should have gotten 30. He was tremendous with his 13 for 15 from the floor, having his 6 boards, but 3 block shots registered, but it seemed like he really had about 5, 6 in that game just because of how much he changed it. 2 steals, his activity. While he did get in foul trouble, Rich said it the other night, it was against Giannis. That's expected. It's against Brook Lopez. Yeah. That's expected. Those are 2 veterans that are physical, and young Bona is going to get in a little bit of trouble with his hand in the cookie jar from time to time. And that's not a bad thing because of the mere fact that you do want him to get this type of experience, because it's not always going to be the Jericho Sims or the Mitchell Robinson. It's going to be starters. Where Embiid is out, he might get the call. It might be a third center. He might get the call based on the matchup. But Bona was really, really good. And seeing Edwards come out of nowhere and do what he has done has been really, really fun. And the Grimes piece, where they're probably going to have to ante up. They're going to probably have to dig deeper into their bag and have to pay him to keep him. And it's probably in their best interest to do so, especially with if they keep the draft pick, that's what they're going to get. They're going to get a player top 6, maybe trade it, as we've discussed. But free agency may not exist as much for them this offseason like it did last season. That is essentially their free agent move.
Could be a defensive free agency, kind of like the one on a much smaller scale and a much and not quite as happy scale, I would say. The Eagles this offseason, right?
Yeah.
Where they're they're trying to pick which guys they're going to retain, unlike the year before when they went out and they signed a bunch of players who ended up winning the Super Bowl, which was cool. But yeah,
and in this case with Grimes, it's a defensive thing. But you picked him up at the break, and we didn't see him a lot with the starters at all.
No.
So with that, that's your offseason acquisition, along with the draft pick. And
that's a good way to look at it.
That's how I look at it.
Yeah, that is definitely a good way to look at it. Okay, so let's say they do re-sign Grimes and Yabu.
Okay.
Okay, so for those 4 guys, those 2 are in.
The 2 rookies and those 2. Okay.
They're signed up. Let's just rank the amount of minutes they would play in a rotation next season. And let's just say they keep the pick, but it's not Cooper Flagg. Like, let's say it's one of like Bailey or Edgecombe. And I know that could make a big difference. But from where you are right now, rank where you think the 4 of them would finish minutes-wise next season.
Grimes 1.
Yes.
I think Grimes would be 1. I would look at
this is where it gets interesting.
This is where it gets tricky because Yabusele, he can play 5, he can play the 4. Bona is probably your backup, but you might bring in a specialist center that's a little bit different from Bona as a maybe stretch guy, potentially. So I would say Bona 2, Yabusele 3, Edwards 4.
I don't hate that. That was the order I was going with. But the reason I asked you that question was, man, Justin Edwards is 4th, and we think he has a real chance to be in the rotation, right?
Yeah.
I mean, hey, somebody's got to be 4th. It's not like we're doing this to to take a dig at Justin Edwards.
And he might play 10 to 15 impactful minutes when he's out there for any given night. I mean, look at, again, I always use the example of if he was the starter, right? We talked about him potentially being the starter. Kyle brought it up. You brought it up. And so did Derek. And mine was the Jermaine Jones, Mark Ivoroni kind of starter. Where you're going out there, you're going to get something. And then he's a quick hook.
And then he doesn't come back.
And then he doesn't come back to the start of the 3rd.
That's the Keith Bogans move.
Keith Bogans move as well. But he'll impact, right? He'll hit a shot. He'll get a couple of steals or a couple of rebounds, make that extra pass, sacrifice his body on a charge, diving on the floor for those loose balls, those 50-50 opportunities. But his minutes might be made with some impactful minutes when he's out there. But that's a good problem to have coming from an undrafted player who has gained some valuable experience during his time. And we still think he can provide something with the starters.
Yeah.
So that's not a bad thing to have when we're talking about him having the fourth most minutes of that group.
Yeah, he might start and have the fourth most
Exactly,
minutes too.
right.
So Yams has a new persona in there, and he says it's going to be Malawak. If it is Malawak, then you move Bona down to fourth probably.
Yeah.
Because
but where does that? Then that's 5 because is Yabusele still on the team?
You might move Edwards up to 2 if it's Malawak, right?
Exactly.
Right. Just considering some of Yabu's value is playing at the 5. I think there are still questions of like whether Yabu is a long-term fit at the 4. Like I think the best thing he did this season, and he did a lot of really good stuff, and I really like Yabu, but the best thing he did this season was play offense at the 5. And there's a trade-off there, right? Because his defense at the 5 was not very good, everybody. And I don't think that's all his fault. I did not like the schemes. I did not like the perimeter defense in front of him. But I think he's much more of a 4 defensively. But, there is a little bit of a question positionally there. Yeah, it's a good question. And so I guess that's my point, in that even though they're losing all of these games, there are still players here that I like.
Yes.
And that I think are likely going to be a part of the next Sixers team that is trying. And then even like a 5th guy like Butler, who, I'm not sure what his future is in terms of being here. We've discussed this a bunch. Like, maybe you bring him back as your 13th to 15th guy next season. Right. I think he's a good player. I think he certainly has some talent, showed a lot in college, a little bit of a slow start in the NBA, but like that dude can run a pick and roll. That dude has decent feel. So, you really could be looking at 5 players here that could fit in on next year's
And
team.
they already have 8 guys out. And of the 8, Kyle Lowry is most likely not back, right? You look at him, Eric Gordon, most likely not back. That's 8 tonight, 8 or 9. I think it was 8 the last time I checked. But
hope so.
Those 2 are out. But then you look at the starters of Oubre, Maxey, George, along with Embiid. Martin is no longer here. He was generally that 5th starter. Then it became Yabusele, some of the other guys, Jared McCain. Jared McCain is also a 5th one that you can maybe slot in there as a starter. So that's your 5. That's 5 right there, plus Gordon, Lowry out.
Lowry, Oubre, Maxey, Drummond.
And Drummond. Drummond may or may not
George,
because of the
Gordon, McCain. So 9.
So Drummond with the opt-in or out, depending on what he wants to do with
Drummond, Gordon, and Lowry, like
most likely gone.
See ya.
Yeah, especially if they do take Malawak and you have Bona. Where does Drummond fit into that?
Well, Drummond does have
a player.
He has a player option.
He has a player option. That's what. But I'm saying, where does he fit into that? He's going to be nailed to that bench, and maybe at this point of his career, he's like, all right, whatever. I'm
a little worried he's going to pick that up.
I just sit at the end of the bench, collect my money, and complain I'm not playing. That kind of thing. So that's where all of the mechanics and stuff really start to come into play. But here's why I did want to ask you this one thing about the Yabusele piece that I know we'll talk about it later once the season ends, and we'll get into his free agency and how much you think he's worth bringing back, what they should do. My thing is this too. When he and his agent, his representation, they look at the landscape of what might be out there money-wise, and Rich, to what you just said, the draft will be over. Bona has played well. Embiid, let's say, knock on wood, he's healthy and he comes back and Embiid's going to play, let's say, 26 to 32 minutes, right? They start to limit his minutes a little bit to preserve his knee and all. How much do you think he's going to factor in role in whatever decision he makes in terms of signing? Money-wise, yes, that's probably going to be the number one factor because he didn't make as much money as he thought at this stage of his career, having to go back overseas. Coming back, getting on this it's a low number that he's on, playing well, but also knowing that the role might be different if Malawak, Bona, Drummond's still in the mix, and Embiid is back, George that can play the 4. How much do you think he and his representation might factor in role on where he decides what he decides to do, not where, just what he decides to do?
Well, I think they're going to factor in a lot on role, especially if you're looking at the taxpayer mid-level exception, right? Because I think their first, I don't know what Yabu, what he values the most, but this is not like a normal free agency, man. I think he's going to have a limited market. Number one, we've talked about how the NBA's middle class, it's shrinking, right? The teams, because of these aprons, they're going to very much do the stars and not scrubs, but stars and less money type of model that we've seen sometimes in baseball, kind of rookie contracts and then those max level deals. So I think he could be limited to, maybe that taxpayer mid-level exception. And then if there's a bunch of teams that say, we want you on that taxpayer mid-level, well, then he can actually pick according to fit, right? Yeah. So, you would hope that the Sixers had a little bit of an advantage in terms of, he clearly liked it here. He embraced the fans. They gave him a shot to come back in the league. But you're right. If there is a situation where there is a desperate contender that might have more high-end talent, but the only thing they really have to offer in free agency this offseason is that taxpayer mid-level exception, which is like, I don't know, it's like $6-7 million. It keeps going up, obviously, with the salary cap. So a decent number. If teams can only offer that, though, you do wonder if there's a desperate contender that's like, this is the only thing we can offer. We don't have a lot of good depth, so you're going to play a ton for us.
Right.
And you wonder if he might just get pried away for those reasons. I don't know. And look, I would love to have Yabu back. It was a pleasure watching him. And I do think the more we have watched him this season, I have started to nitpick him a little bit in terms of I do have some worries about his position and where he fits in the NBA. That said, I'm trying not to overreact to he's playing with a lot of non-NBA players and a bunch of young guys, not Tyrese Maxey, not Joel Embiid. I think we should probably we should index more on the first half of the season.
What we saw,
right?
Where? Yeah. What we saw
when the whole team was trying, and that was when he was playing better ball. So I do think that is important. Is as much as I do have concerns about his position, like he played his better ball when the team was at least a little more intact and made a little bit more sense. So I think we should give him credit for that.
Yeah, and I wonder too, when it all comes down to it and we get to it, that how much he really believes in the very near future, especially the end of his career in the NBA, of making a decision on what he wants to do, whether he stays here or goes elsewhere. So fun conversation, and I know we'll have a lot more about the young Sixers, but I just kind of wanted to throw it all at you and certainly Rich and Bree about where we are and what we've seen from these young players collectively, not just with Edwards and Bona that we've enjoyed, and the same thing with Grimes as a young veteran, Yabusele as a guy returning back from overseas, but seeing the same thing from Jared Butler as, I'm all right with him getting a standard NBA deal as a 15th guy, and you figure out what you're doing with 16, 17, and 18, even though Daryl Morey's probably going to keep 18 open. But with that, some good things that we've seen from these young players overall. With that,
they're bad because their team defense is awful.
Yeah.
That is the primary reason that they have lost all of these games. So there have been good individual offensive performances throughout this run. But as a team collectively, defensively, they're giving themselves no shot. But it's almost like an easier way to lose games. I feel like the last 3 or 4 that we've done, which have all been losses, these home losses, I feel like they've been a little easier to take. They've been roughly competitive games. Yeah. They lose by 15 points because the other team makes 45 to 55% of their 3-pointers, and that's it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why, why I feel like weirdly, like, I'm not saying I'm like completely gung-ho on a lot of these young guys, but I can certainly see the upside with them.
Right. And we're not going overboard we can only go off of what we've seen some pretty decent things. And we know that this roster is going to look completely different next year. Many of them will not be here, but evaluating and basing things off of what they've done a pretty good job overall. So with that job that they have to do here, Rich, over the next couple of games here that the Sixers have, starting with tonight, they have the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Timberwolves right now are fighting for the right to stay in the top 6. They are right there where they can end up 5, 6, or 7 right now. Or 8. They're not too far back from there. Just to let everybody know right now, Minnesota, as of yesterday's games, it's funny because they did not play. They were in the 7th spot, Minnesota, and right now they can move up to as high as 3 because they're only 2 back of the Lakers.
There's 2 games separating 3 and 8 right now.
Yes,
it's a dogfight.
It is a dogfight. So again, with it, Minnesota is fighting for their seeding. So they really have something to play for.
They want this one
right now. So they really want the Sixers. They beat the Nets the other night when we were on. They've been off since then.
Have won 4 in a row.
They've won 4 in a row. They had a really good win in double overtime over the Nuggets, which was on, I think it was Wednesday night.
I think they would want to play the Nuggets in the playoffs again.
So do I.
They play well.
They beat them last year.
Yeah, they play well against
different team from last year.
It is a different team from last year. But I think their GM, who came from the Nuggets, everybody clowned on him for the Gobert trade, and that was looking awful.
Myself included.
Me too. It was looking awful 1 year in. And, I think it's come back down to earth a little bit this year because they're not quite as good. That said, like, the Gobert acquisition was in part to beat that Denver team specifically, and they did that last year, and it looks like they got a pretty good shot of it this year. But they have no idea if they're going to be able to play the Nuggets, right? It's going to be roulette. They could play the Nuggets in the first round,
right?
But they could play 4 or 5 other teams.
Exactly. So unless they're really positioning themselves to play someone, they don't want to be in the play-in tournament. And they can handle their business going forward. They have the Sixers tonight. They've beaten the Nets already. They have the Nets again, Minnesota. So they're going to try to compile more wins. And the last game against the Brooklyn Nets was in Brooklyn. The next one will be in Minnesota. So that said, the Sixers. What I wanted to ask Rich, all of you, and Bree, of course, is this. How much of a spoiler over these next 5 games? We thought that maybe they can win 1 game against Washington, which is next week, middle of the week, in Washington. That's still a toss-up. That's a 50-50 game because they lost to them here. They can most certainly go into Washington and lose to that basketball team there. My question, though, is how much of a spoiler can they play over the next 5, not just tonight? Because I think it's going to be really difficult tonight. Miami is next at Miami. They lost there here last week to the Miami Heat.
And then they play the 3 East play-in teams.
Washington, Atlanta, Chicago.
Miami, Atlanta, Chicago. They're all fighting, I believe, for 8 to
10.
8 to 10.
Yeah,
right
because Chicago is still right there.
Yeah. And they're all, 1 game is separating them. So I think if you are
especially you want to host a game and you want the opportunity to play just 1 game.
If you are a Tank Commander Sixers fan, which I get, I kind of, I'm not trying to be out loud about it, even though we do wear the helmets in the post game. I think you would hope that those teams stay bunched up for the last few games because you don't want Chicago, the last game, just not having to play for anything. Yeah. They might have to play for something. They might be tied with Atlanta and they got a chance to host one of those games or sneak up to the 8th seed. You got to hope that it stays competitive in there, and it might. Yeah. I mean, hey, look, they're all playing the Sixers. Because
it's going to be tough for them to catch Orlando. Orlando has a game and a half up on Atlanta. Atlanta's lost 3 in a row, so they've kind of screwed themselves in that spot to really fight and screwed the Sixers in that way. But a win is going to be important to stay away from Bulls and the Heat, who are only a game back of them. Yeah. So you hope that things play out that way where they still are jumbled up, as Rich just said, still fighting and try to find their way in there. And maybe the Sixers can play spoiler. Maybe they can't. But for the most part, you look at this and you say, all right, guys, this is big here going down the stretch. And when we're looking at the Nets, who they're right there with as well, we'll get to the Pelicans in a second. The Nets have the Raptors, who have lost some games consecutively again. Now, the Nets could really technically beat the Raptors. And the Raptors, you don't have to worry about them anymore as far as where they are because they have a 3-game lead, 2-game loss lead over the Sixers right now, but a 3-game lead in general because the Sixers are not going to beat Minnesota tonight. And so it's going to be a 3-game lead where you really don't have to worry about the Raptors tomorrow and what they're going to do in terms of winning against the Nets. So you're really rooting for the Nets tomorrow. Sixers obviously tonight.
Absolutely. Want the Nets.
Yes, Sixers obviously tonight. And for the Nets, once again, this is one of their better chances because they do have Minnesota again, as we just said. But they have New Orleans on Tuesday. So two really good games back-to-back that could help the Sixers with the Nets. Who you rooting for in that Nets-Pelicans one? Because realistically, it's going to be tough to catch the Pelicans. You just hope the Nets just win a couple of games.
What do you need? You need 2 losses from the Pelicans?
You need 2 from the Pelicans, but you need the Nets, who have 2 up on the Sixers right now.
I think I'm risking that. I think
you risk it?
I think I'm rooting for the Pels to get that one.
I got to see what the Pelicans are playing for me to go on that side, man.
I get that. Hey, look, either way,
They have the Bucks next.
Either way, it's a good
tomorrow.
outcome. But yeah, I mean, like, look, if you were able to get up to 4, that's a huge difference. We're going into lottery night with like 80% odds, I think it is, give or take a percentage or two. I don't know the exact odds. That's a big difference. It's a very big difference from where we were a few days ago, too. So
yeah. So look, a lot of
depends. I'm not sure
a lot
the
of
Pels
stuff going on.
I'm not sure the Pels are going to lose another game though. That's the tough thing.
Pelicans have. By the way, can the Sixers play spoilers at all?
No.
Okay, good. Pelicans have Milwaukee tomorrow at home, at Brooklyn, at Milwaukee, home Miami, home OKC. Do you see? Do you smell 2 wins in there?
I don't.
That's why you need Brooklyn to just keep winning.
Okay. Well then it becomes pressure free, right? The Sixers can win one and people will be happy and it's fine. It's the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. So when you talked about right now, the Sixers have, what did you say for what? The number 1 overall pick or just in general? 42 overall
No, just
pick.
to keep the pick.
Oh, just to keep it. So they have 42% to
if they
stay in the
moved-
top 4.
If they moved up to 4, it would get closer to like 80%.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. Because number 1 overall is 10 and a half. Top 4.
I'm not worried about that. I mean, I am
42.
worried about that, but it's
That's
more the keep the pick.
Right.
Just
Yeah,
stuff.
absolutely. All right. So, of course, we'll update you on all that stuff as it goes along with these games that we will have going forward. Sixers tonight taking on the Minnesota Timberwolves. No spoiler alert there. Let's get to our Final Four conversation here because the games are already underway, Rich. Houston and Duke later. That's the 8:30 game. Right now, Auburn, Florida, 3 minutes and 30 seconds to play in the first. Auburn with a 35-29 lead at the moment. How do you feel right now? What's your national championship game look like for Monday night?
I thought it was going to be Florida Duke, but Florida's losing right now. So
Only by 7.
by 7. They got a little bit of time, and our guy Walt Clayton, he's an assassin late in games.
He is not afraid.
Yeah, he's a pro. It's been funny to see. He was like not even on draft boards.
Nah.
And a lot of people have just kind of slid him into like even like the back half
Like
of the
quietly,
first round. Yeah.
right?
Like, oh, by the way, this guy's pretty good.
Right.
I know he's old and he's smaller, but like I don't know. At some point, a guy who was taking over the
be
NCAA like that.
You could be in Landry Shamet role.
Yeah.
Yeah. You just come in, shoot, do what he does, and that's it.
But yeah, the Duke game will be fun because Houston, they have been basically the best defense in college basketball for years. I think they are currently Ken Pom, the best defense now, and they are so unbelievably aggressive. Like if the Sixers at the NBA level, I think their ball pressure is like probably like a -2 on a scale of 1 to 10. Houston's a 10 at the college level. So it's not going to change whether Cooper Flag is going to be the number 1 overall pick or not, but a nice test. It'll be fun to watch him play against them. And also, I think it is a chance to see what Knipple can do. And also, Malawak, too. They put 2 on the ball a lot, too. So he might have some opportunities to make some plays out of the short roll. So that'll be a good one. We will have that one on alongside the Sixers game. Yeah.
And I don't think they're going to go in any direction of let's just let Cooper Flag cook and we'll shut these other guys down.
Well, he better do it nice-o then because they put 2 on the ball for
Exactly.
anybody.
Yeah. Maybe a big Proctor night on the catch and shoot.
Yeah.
Maybe a big Proctor night.
I think they're going to win. I just think they're a little too talented.
All right, so Rich's Final Four. You had Florida. You lean in Auburn right now just because the score is 40-34 now. What are you looking at, man?
You're ahead of me on YouTube TV.
All right, let's.
No, I still got Florida. Florida's going to come back, win the game.
All right, Florida and Duke in the Final Four.
What about you?
Let's get to our pregame pick segment brought to you by Bet365. Download the Bet365 app. Use code PHLY365 when you sign up. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Rich, my picks for tonight, national championship game.
Oh, wow.
I went Florida and Duke.
Same as me.
Yes, that's a plus 136. Maybe it changed a little bit because the game is ongoing and they may have adjusted the number a little bit.
You get Florida at a better number
You
right
might
now.
get them at a better number, and that might boost your same game parlay of choosing the national championship game. If you want to add that with Minnesota tonight just to simply beat the Sixers, have at it. Go for it. Make sure you do so at Bet365. Very simple tonight. Download the Bet365 app. Use code PHLY365 when you sign up. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 plus and physically located in Pennsylvania. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, we're going to go watch a lot of basketball. And when we do, we're going to come back and talk to you about it a little bit later. Sixers, Wolves, Final Four conversation, multiple TVs and laptops. Let's have at it. For Rich, Bree, I'm Devon. We'll talk to Derek after the game because Kyle is off tonight. So we'll have all of that for you post-game, prospect watch, tank watch, all of it right here on the PHLY Sixers post-game show presented by Bet365. Enjoy the games.
We all silly like the mayor.